a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farrow.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Good morning, it's Friday. This is The Point on GB News with me, Beth Turner, on your TV, radio and online. Thanks for keeping me company today. Stick right here for the next 2 hours for everything you need to know about what's going on in the world. Lots of debate with the very best guests and your opinions as well, of course. Make sure you get in touch with your views as usual. GBviews at gbnews.uk. I will be getting to as many of those as I can throughout the show. But first of all, here is all of your latest news headlines.
Hello there, good morning. It's 1 minute past 10. I'm Bethany Elsey, here to bring you up to date from the GB newsroom. NHS leaders are warning the UK faces a humanitarian crisis this winter unless further action is taken to tackle rising energy bills. In a letter to the government, the NHS Confederation says people will have to choose whether to skip meals to heat their homes or live in cold, damp conditions. It warns this could lead to an increase in annual deaths and create further pressure on the health service. The government previously announced £400 of support for millions of households, but won't do anything further until the new Prime Minister is in office. More travel disruption today as Transport for London workers are staging a 24-hour strike in a continued row over jobs and pensions. Commuters are being advised to avoid the tube, which will have little or no services running. Most buses across West and South West London are also cancelled. Mainline services across the UK have been affected this morning too, due to yesterday's strike, and there's further action planned for tomorrow. Transport Secretary Grant Shapps claims union bosses are getting in the way of a deal.
I think the simple answer to this would be for the union bosses to actually put the deal that's on the table, which is an 8% pay rise over 2 years, no compulsory redundancies, for example, on Network Rail, and put that to their membership. And I think if they did that, the membership may well accept it. If that doesn't happen, plan B, if you like, is we're going to make sure that we actually get on with these very, very important modernisations, which are holding our railway back.
Well, Labour's Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, says it's the government that is hindering negotiations.
What I'd say to the RMT is the primary motivator for you going on strike today is your concerns about conditions the government may attach to a funding deal with TfL. We're on the same side here. Nobody wants the government to be attaching unreasonable conditions to our deal. The only reason we need a deal is because of the pandemic. Let's work together with businesses, with other Londoners, to get the best possible deal for London. Today, it's ordinary Londoners, it's commuters, it's businesses who are caught in the crossfire. The government, Grant Shapps, isn't affected at all.
UK retail sales increased in July, but experts say a downward trend in consumer spending shows no sign of turning around. The Office for National Statistics says the 0.3% rise in July is significantly higher than expectations of a 0.2% drop, but sales fell by 1.2% in the 3 months to July. Retailers say online sales picked up due to offers and promotions, but spending on clothing and household goods declined again. Meanwhile, the government has borrowed more money than expected, with interest payments on debt rising by more than 40% last month. The ONS says government borrowing hit £4.9 billion in July. That's more than £2 billion higher than predicted by experts. Both candidates for Prime Minister have pledged further assistance for households amid the rising cost of living, but the higher than expected figures puts pressure on funds available to the government. Police investigating the death of 87-year-old Thomas O'Halloran in West London have charged a man with his murder. 44-year-old Lee Byer is accused of stabbing Mr Halloran to death while he was riding his mobility scooter in the town of Greenford on Tuesday. Mr Byer is expected to appear at Willesden Magistrates Court later today. A drought has been declared in southwest Wales after an extended period of hot and dry weather. A hosepipe ban has also been introduced to ease the pressure on public water supplies. National Resources Wales says the whole region had just 65.5% of its average rainfall in July. And self-driving, fully autonomous vehicles could be on UK motorways in the next 3 years under new government plans. The Department for Transport says £100 million is being invested into the scheme, along with new legislation to allow for the safe rollout of the technology. The government claims the self-driving industry could create up to 38,000 jobs and make roads safer. This is GB News. We're bringing more news as it happens now. Let's get back to Bev. Thank you, Bethany. Good morning. This is To The Point on GB News with me, Beth Turner, on TV, radio and online. We've got a brilliant show lined up to kickstart your day. Here is what's on the menu. So tonight at 7 o'clock, the clash you've all been waiting for. No, I'm not talking about Anthony Joshua versus Alexandra Usk, but Rishi Sunak versus Liz Truss. The two Tory leadership hopefuls face Tory party members in Manchester, and we're bringing it to you live and exclusively on GB News. I'll be giving you a taste of what to expect. Swimmers are being warned away from coasts up and down the country because of sewage being pumped into the sea. It is a terrible story. So what on earth are regulators doing about it? If you live near an area affected by this awful sewage pollution, do get in touch. And travel disruption. London Underground workers hit the picket lines this morning as tube services grind to a halt. More strikes on National Rail are expected tomorrow across the UK. I want to know how you've been affected. We've got all of that coming up and much more across the programme. You can get in touch with your views, as usual, on gbviews at gbnews.uk. OK, so the leadership contest, you know about it. We've talked about it a lot, between former Chancellor Rishi Sunak and Foreign Secretary Liz Truss continues. As GB News' Alistair Stewart is going to host a hustings in Manchester tonight. You can watch and hear it live on GB News from 7 o'clock. I know I'm being a little bit dismissive of this, as though you're all a bit bored, but I said yesterday, I think as we get closer to the wire with this, you're going to start to see both of them get the knives out a bit, and who better to moderate that than Alistair Stewart. Our reporter Sophie Reaper has been out on the streets in my hometown of Manchester ahead of tonight's debate to ask people what issues matter to them and who they might want to choose.
Helping people with low income and putting some money, something on for them.
I think that they should be looking to do something about the energy bill crisis that we've got going on. The cost of living is just going to spiral out of control. I think people are already struggling.
I don't care whoever it is, as long as they, do something, Action is, speaks louder than words,
Tories need to be out, but also Keir Starmer needs to not be pretending to be Labour when he's absolutely not. We need to stop trying to privatise everything.
I don't think Sunak comes from a working class background. He doesn't know what it's like to live a standard life.
Make it better, take care of the people. You know, more recreation and the children and the streets. You know, homeless people, help homeless people.
It's Labour, it's got to be. This is a working city. Everybody works, everybody struggles, but ain't no one helping Manchester out.
The new Prime Minister needs to focus on the levelling up of the UK. I think the public transport up here is shocking compared to London. They keep on saying that they're going to do more to help Manchester, but they're really not.
The one that's probably going to do the better job is probably Rishi Sunak. However, I wouldn't necessarily prefer Rishi Sunak. I'm not sure I trust him.
A lot of people are struggling. They are well dressed with a gold chain, but mentally they are going through a lot. And I don't think government is doing enough.
If I was Prime Minister for the day, the first thing I would do would get them all in and I'd say, right, there's no more expenses being paid and I want you to take a pay cut. And whoever was left, they're the true ones, aren't they? They're the ones that will help you lead the country. We want a strong person.
And that's neither of them?
No. They've got no bottle, darling.
Better wages, better schemes for single parents.
Increase the minimum wage to help the people that are really struggling, which is lots. I work in a hospital and we've got nurses that are using food banks. Should never be happening.
Tax cuts is a load of nonsense because at the end of the day, we're a society.
Fascinating. I love this channel because I love the fact that we're hearing from so many of you, because I think that is where the truth lies, don't you? Well, joining us now to discuss this in a bit more detail are Henry Hill, Deputy Editor of Conservative Home, and Peter Edwards, former editor of Labour List. Thank you both for joining us very much. Do you find it interesting, Henry, when you hear people talking like that? Because the same themes come up time and time again, don't they? You know, they've got no bottle, love, is what that woman said. There's a sense that neither of these two candidates represent real people. They don't feel that they walk in their shoes in any sense whatsoever.
Yeah, that's true. I think that sometimes the danger of that in itself can be slightly overstated for Conservative politicians. I mean, you only need to look at Boris Johnson. He never pretended to be a man who was like everybody else. And yet, electorally speaking, that didn't do him any harm. I think that's really dangerous when, you know, someone like Rishi Sunak is very wealthy and is then seen to be pursuing policies which don't put him on the side of ordinary people, because then it turns, you know, they think it's because he's incredibly rich. So it's going to be an incredibly tricky for whoever wins this leadership contest. It does look like it will be Liz Truss, because the cost of living crisis is going to have to be priority number one. There's a huge sort of number of crises that are all intersecting and happening at once, and there simply isn't an awful lot of money. And Liz Truss especially, you know, we had one of the people you were speaking to in Manchester talking about the tax cuts she wants. There's simply not money for those tax cuts. So the question she has to answer is, you know, at the time when inflation is eating away at budgets, when there's huge pressure on the NHS, when public sector workers want wage rises, how are you going to pay for this? Are you going to borrow, which will be very expensive, or are you going to cut? And if you are going to cut, you should really tell us what.
Peter, is it music to your ears when you hear members of the public like that, basically being very ambivalent about both these candidates? Nobody is saying, oh, I really love Liz Truss, like she is the person to lead us into the future, or Rishi Sunak represents everything that I believe in. Nobody's hearing that about either of these two candidates.
They're not, that's right. But it shouldn't be music to Labour's ears, because anyone would want British people to be happy, healthy, and be able to afford to put food on their table and get public transport, which are fairly basic fundamental rights. But I think that there's a broader benefit for Labour in the fact that Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss have been so unsparingly rude about each other all summer. But to go to your other point and Henry's point about being out of touch and so on, like I personally feel Rishi Sunak is very out of touch, and that was typified by his photo opportunity, where I think he was trying to put petrol in an electric car, and they hadn't really spelt this out a few months back. But Labour has to be cautious, because remember, Labour, not that long ago, made a lot of attacks on George Osborne and David Cameron, not just for being out of touch, but also for being personally quite well off. And Labour still went on to lose the 2015 election. So I think maybe what your clip shows is actually people want solutions rather than just knocking 10 bells out of each other.
Absolutely. And Henry, we did hear one lady there saying, you know, Labour need to stop pretending that they're not. What do you think people mean by that? Because there is a sense that Keir Starmer isn't also relatable to in whatever way, that even diehard Labour voters aren't feeling massively represented by him either.
I think there is certainly sometimes a tendency, without being too partisan about it, that the Labour attacks the Tories for being out of touch, despite the fact that basically, whilst Rishi Sunak is incredibly wealthy, for the most part, the parties at the professional Westminster level are drawn from a very similar milieu, and it's not necessary. And you can understand why people don't necessarily think that Labour are inherently more of the people than the Tories are in a way they might once have done. I think the other thing as well is simply the fact that there's no obvious solutions on the table. Labour, unlike in previous years, unlike in the 90s when Labour was waiting on the sidelines, Labour don't have a clear programme for government that I think someone on the street could tell you what it is. They want the government to meet with the unions, but they haven't explained what their policy on inflationary pay demands is or anything like that. So I think what people are saying is, look, the Tories are this, we're a bit tired of them, but we want a clear alternative, and Keir Starmer hasn't yet given us one.
Yeah. What do you think this evening, Peter, with this hustings in Manchester being screened exclusively by GB News, can these two candidates say anything that they haven't already said in all of these hustings to win over any wavering Conservative voters, but also those people who will one day vote in a general election?
No, I'm not sure they can. And just briefly going back to Henry's point, when you're leader of the opposition, you tend not to have a full policy programme when you're halfway through a parliamentary cycle. And I think David Cameron was exactly the same. And obviously, Labour's good policies like the windfall tax have been pinched by the government. In terms of Rishi Sunak, I think he obviously has to go for broke because so many polls have put him behind. But I think if I imagine myself as Liz Truss, which is not something I do too often, but I essentially want to say as little as possible to preserve that lead. Because if you're the front runner, you just want to be cautious, small c Conservative. And as pressure goes on Rishi Sunak to catch up, he'll be forced into more overt policy offers and perhaps things that he's not comfortable with. And obviously, we've seen one or two U-turns from him already on tax cuts. So, I mean, Rishi Sunak, having started as a favourite 2 or 3 months ago, has to go for broke.
Henry, it's Liz Truss's to lose now, isn't it? With Peter's analogy, it's a bit like a football match. She's just got to kick the ball around amongst herself now with her own teammates and just hope she doesn't lose one into the back of the net of the opposition. It's that stage in the match, isn't it? It's all hers to give away at this stage.
Yeah, absolutely. She is streets ahead by every available metric. The Conhome survey, YouGov, I think every single pollster shows her ahead. But also, crucially, more than half of Tory members have already voted. So Rishi Sunak is fishing in an increasingly small pool of voters who haven't made up their minds yet. And I think we're closing in on the point where even if he won every single one of the people who haven't voted yet, Liz Truss might still win. Now, I think that's actually a problem for the Conservative Party, because it does mean that in theory, you could be in a position where a candidate, their campaign collapsed for some reason late in the game, yet they'd already won the election. And I think the party really needs to think about, if you're going to have a 6 to 8 week contest, why would you open ballots 2 or 3 weeks in? It makes the later stages of the contest a bit difficult. But yes, absolutely. Unless something goes catastrophically wrong for Liz Truss, every indication is that she has probably already won and will be our next Prime Minister.
OK, thank you both, guys, for joining us this morning. Henry Hill, Deputy Editor of Conservative Home, and Peter Edwards, former editor of Labour List. You've been telling me what you think, as you do, which is marvellous. I couldn't do it without you. Jeff in Leicester has said about tonight's hustings, the self-indulgent Tory hustings with their incredible cost and environmental issues with all the travel show the Tories are either terminally out of touch or they just don't care. And Madge has said the elderly lady in the Vox Pops who we saw there, they've got no bottle, darling, is what she said. No, they've got no bottle, darling. It was more like that. Spoke for the majority when she said that politicians should have the Riot Act read to them, no expenses and a pay cut. and choose the Prime Minister from the few that are stood there standing. I honestly think if there were more women like that in politics, I'm sure we could shake up the whole thing, couldn't we? And make it work for everybody. And just to point out with these hustings, I know it does feel like they're going on forever, but this is our democracy. This is the process that we go through in this situation with Boris Johnson having resigned under these circumstances. This is, I guess, the fairest way we can do it, although I agree with what Henry was saying there about the timescale does feel a little ridiculous. Right, moving on now. Coming up after the break, water companies are dumping sewage next to our beaches. If you're going on holiday this week, you want to stick around and watch this. I'm going to be talking to one campaigner to find out why this is happening and why regulators don't seem to be stopping it. It is genuinely shocking. Don't go anywhere.
Hello, good morning. Aidan McGivern here with the latest forecast. Showers for many of us this morning, but the showers are replaced by sunny spells in the south, whilst further scattered showers continue in the afternoon in the north. It's towards the north where low pressure is currently slowly moving near Iceland, and that's sent a couple of weather fronts in from the Atlantic. Those are clearing the southeast during the morning, but the potential for some heavy downpours for a time, East Anglia and the southeast, before eventually it turns drier and brighter, and by lunchtime it's a dry afternoon for southern parts of the UK with sunny spells, whilst it's going to feel cooler for Scotland, Northern Ireland and Northern England. Scattered showers here, a bit more cloud, a breeze, although still some sunshine away from the showers, and temperatures reaching 19 to 21 Celsius, 22 to 26 Celsius for southern areas with that sunshine and lighter winds. And actually, many of the showers in the north die away overnight, leaving behind clear spells for a time. But by midnight, the next area of rain and wind arrives into the far northwest. Northern Ireland, western Scotland turn wet and increasingly breezy overnight, risk of coastal gales for exposed parts of western Scotland. Away from there, most places start off the weekend dry. There'll be some sunshine first thing, a fresh start, I think a cooler night to come compared with recent nights, especially in the south. We keep the sunshine though for the Midlands, eastern and southern England through a good part of the morning. Areas of cloud do drift south and they'll give some showers across central and southwestern areas, but the most lively showers are expected across Scotland and Northern Ireland and turn up into northern England by the end of the afternoon. Feeling cool in the north with that breeze, I think high teens at best. Further south, low to mid-20s, so around average for the time of year. Sunday starts dry and bright for many of us. It stays that way through the day in the east. However, it turns a bit wetter later on in the west.
There's just 2 weeks left of voting in the battle to become Britain's next Prime Minister. Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak have been dashing around the country, and tonight they make their pitches to Conservative voters in the heart of Labour-run Manchester. But do either of them have what it takes to defend and maintain Boris Johnson's mighty majority? GB News is proud to be hosting the Conservative hustings in Manchester, live and exclusive from 7 p.m. GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh my goodness. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Good morning, it's 10:24 a.m. It's Friday morning. This is To The Point with me, Beth Turner, on GB News. We are live on your TV, online and radio this morning, as always. Now, a story that really upsets me. Swimmers up and down the country are being told to stay away from our beaches because of high levels of sewage pollution. Campaign group Surfers Against Sewage have said that at least 50 areas were affected by sewage pollution warnings. According to figures from the Environment Agency, water companies have discharged raw sewage into rivers in England more than 400,000 times last year. If you live near a coastal area, if you've seen this happening near you, please do send us some photos. I know they're not the prettiest photos in the world, but I think it does really illustrate what is happening to our beautiful coastline and our riverways, our waterways. So gbviews@gbnews.uk, send us your pictures. I'm delighted to say that I'm joined now by Fergal Sharkey, former vocalist for punk band The Undertones and passionate campaigner for our waterways. Good morning, Fergal Sharkey. Now, Pete, a lot of people will be going, hang on a minute, he is that singer that I love. What has he got to do with this topic? But you are a very passionate vocal advocate, aren't you, for clean waterways? How did you get involved?
It's a perfectly valid question to be asking. I have a terrible habit since childhood of standing on the banks of river, waving fly rods around my head, rather inefficiently, I have to say. But as a result, for 50 years now, I've had a passion for rivers, their health, what we do to them, how we treat them. And invariably, 5 or 6 years ago, that passion has now boiled over into voicing and venting my frustration and anger with what we're doing to our rivers and our seas.
So what have you seen over that period of time, Fergal, that's made you so incensed? What's changed?
Well, it is quite simply, the easiest statistic I can give you is there is not a single river in England that currently achieves good overall environmental health. Every single river in the country is polluted, and one of the largest sources of that pollution is the water industry. So not only is our coast, as the video you're illustrating, all of that sewage is washing down the rivers into the sea, and that simply gets added to the sewage that's currently being discharged directly onto our beaches. Ultimately, what we're looking at here is 3 decades of underinvestment by the water industry and their infrastructure, profiteering by the companies concerned, a complete failure of regulation on the part of Ofwat and the Environment Agency, and a complete vacuum when it comes to the political oversight and control of this industry. It has to stop.
Which, given that the average water company executive salaries and bonuses rose by 21% between 21 to 22, according to research by the Lib Dems, a year-on-year average rise per executive of nearly £200,000 per person. I do wonder how these people sleep at night. I know that's not a very sort of political question to give you, but on a personal level, how do they sleep at night knowing what is happening to our environment whilst taking such a vast income from these projects?
Well, I suspect when you've been paid £3 million a year quite comfortably, is clearly you have a wide range of bedding and mattresses to choose from for that kind of salary. To give your viewers a bit of insight here, water companies have paid their shareholders over £72 billion. That is our money. And you are right, over the last 3 years, I think, the largest paid executives took home £50 million between them. And yes, last year, as you've touched upon, in fact, over the last 2 years, water companies have spent almost 6 million hours on over 775,000 separate occasions, dumping sewage into our rivers. The truth is, the water industry is the only industry I can see where your performance bonus is directly inversely proportional to how competent and good you are at your job. Clearly, the more hopeless you are, the bigger the bonus.
Oh, well, it does look that way. We're showing a map on our screen now, which is one of the graphics that the brilliant Surfers Against Sewage do. I've been a big fan of that organisation for several years. And they're showing all along the south coast at the moment, all the beautiful areas which so many people will be going to. It's August, you know, from Bournemouth and Brighton all the way along, Dorset, South Devon and Cornwall. Is anybody responsible for this not happening, Fergal? Like, sure, it just feels like where is the adult in the room in this story? Who is going to hold them? Who is going to hold them to account? Whose responsibility is it? Should there be penalties against them? What should we be doing?
Well, that is the job of the regulators. That's why they're there. Bearing in mind, these companies are operating state-granted monopolies. You, as a customer, have no decision at all in who provides you with your water. You're stuck with the water company that you're allocated. Now, the truth is, that's why we have regulators. The Ofwat are there to regulate the economic activity of these industries to make sure they're not profiteering at our expense. Well, that's a fail. And the Environment Agency, who are supposed to make sure these water companies are not having a harmful impact on the environment. Well, clearly that's a massive big fail as well. To give you an indication, right now, the Secretary of State could fix all of this with nothing more than the stroke of a pen. He can order Ofwat to issue what's called enforcement orders, and that is a binding legal instruction to the water companies to do exactly what they want, when they want, how they want it done. And if the water companies do not comply or fail to deliver on that legal mandate, Ofwat has then the power to fine these companies up to 10% of their annual turnover. And I strongly suspect.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm just so tired of spineless regulatory bodies apparently in collusion with these companies. I have to give you the statement from Southern Water. Obviously, they aren't here. They wish to say in a statement that heavy rain was to blame for sewage releases, and this was done to protect homes and businesses from potential flooding. In your vast knowledge, what does that mean to you, and why should that be avoidable, Fergal Sharkey?
Well, the reality of the situation is the UK government was actually taken to court in 2012. And the Court of Justice ruled that dumping sewage into the environment is illegal, save for exceptional situations. Now, with Southern Water in particular, over the last 2 years, they've spent over 360,000 hours dumping sewage into the environment on almost 40,000 separate occasions. Any of that exceptional? In fact, the regulators wrote to the water companies last year, reminding them of their legal obligations, that they are supposed to build, operate and maintain sewage systems capable of dealing with the contents of those sewers, no matter what's in there, or indeed no matter how it got in there. The regulator went on to say that water companies have been paid all of the funding needed for 30 years to meet that legal obligation. Well, clearly they haven't been spending it on the sewage system, which then begs the question, what happened to money? Well, we know where that's gone. Executive salaries and bonuses and the shareholders.
Fergal Sharkey, it is a joy to talk to you. I wish it was under more happy circumstances, but thank you. You are an amazing advocate for our waterways, and whenever we can get you on here to make your very strong case for us all, that's what you're doing. We will have you back. Thank you so much, Fergal Sharkey there. And you know what really bothers me? All this talk about green levies, all these taxes on our utility bills, because apparently we've got to keep the planet clean. Can we start, please? Any politicians watching, with the things that we really care about, can we start with our waters? Can we start with our seas and our oceans and our rivers? If they are not clean, our whole ecosystem is under threat. And on a very basic level, there should be children paddling in the sea this week without worrying about stepping over sewage. Right, after the break, unions hit the picket lines in London this morning as the London Underground grounds to a halt. More travel disruption is expected tomorrow. How have you been affected? Let us know. But before that, a look at this morning's news.
Good morning, it's 10:33. I'm Bethany Elsey in the GB newsroom. NHS leaders are warning the UK faces a humanitarian crisis this winter unless further action is taken to tackle rising energy bills. In a letter to the government, the NHS Confederation says surging costs could mean people can't afford to heat their homes, potentially leading to an increase in annual deaths and creating further pressure on the health service. The government has promised £400 of support for millions of households, but won't do anything further until the new Prime Minister is in office. More travel disruption today as Transport for London workers strike in a continued row over jobs and pensions. Commuters are being advised to avoid the tube, which will have little or no services running. Most buses across West London are also cancelled. Mainline services across the UK have been affected this morning too, due to yesterday's strike, and there's further action planned for tomorrow. Police investigating the death of 87-year-old Thomas O'Halloran in West London have charged a man with his murder. 44-year-old Lee Byer is accused of stabbing Mr O'Halloran to death while he was riding his mobility scooter in the town of Greenford on Tuesday. He's expected to appear at Willesden Magistrates Court later today. And some news in the last half an hour. A man has been arrested on suspicion of the abduction and sexual assault of a 6-year-old girl in Greater Manchester on Wednesday. The 23-year-old remains in custody for questioning. A 35-year-old man who was arrested on Wednesday has been released without further action. Police say the girl was taken into a wooded area in Droylsden and then to a van where she was attacked. She's now back with her family. On TV, online and DAB plus radio, this is GB News. We'll get back to Bev in just a moment.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
But first, here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.19 and €1.179. And the price of gold currently stands at £1,476.65 per ounce.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News, investments that matter.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Good morning, it's 10:38 a.m. on Friday. This is To The Point with Beth Turner on GB News. We are live on your TV, online and radio this morning. So, depressingly, we've got another day of strike action today. In London, workers from the RMT trade union are on the picket lines as Transport for London advises people not to travel unless it is absolutely necessary. At the same time, over 1,600 people employed by the London United Bus Company are also on strike in another pay dispute. Today's walkout comes between two network rail strikes, yesterday, of course, and another one tomorrow. This is also due to a long-running pay dispute involving several other unions. So let's cross live to our reporter Ellie Costello, who's in London's Victoria Station for us this morning. Good morning, Ellie. How busy is it looking there? Do you think there's a sense now that people have kind of got used to working from home? So frankly, a warm Friday, a train strike comes as a good excuse to spend another day working on your laptop in the garden?
You know what, Bev, is actually really interesting. We started this morning outside London Euston, and I think if you'd have asked me then, I would have said most people were working from home. They'd heeded the advice to stay at home and avoid London today and trying to travel around London. But we've come now down to London Victoria, and I think you might be able to see the huge throng of people just over my left shoulder here. They have been waiting for a taxi outside the station, some of them, they tell me, for up to 45 minutes. And the people at the front of the queue are very, very frustrated by the lack of public transport in London today. Many of them have got suitcases, many of them are tourists. They didn't even realise that this industrial action was taking place. You can see a bus that's just about to go past my shoulder here. If you're listening on the radio, it's a packed bus that's just gone past. That is the sense that we're getting down here in Victoria, that people are trying to get into taxis, they're trying to get on buses because there is a strike on the tube, on the underground and on the overground as well. It's making it very difficult to get around, and people here are very frustrated. There is that triple threat today, the tube strike, the overground strike, and there's also a bus strike, Bev, in South and West London. 1,600 bus drivers have also gone in strike in a row over pay as well. So it's very, very difficult if you're trying to get around London today. And of course, the timing is significant as well. We had the National Rail strike yesterday. We have another one tomorrow, and this London strike action is sandwiched right in the middle of those 2 days. So this morning at Euston, the first trains weren't even leaving until almost 8 o'clock this morning. It makes it so hard for a commute when people are trying to get to work. So there was that hangover this morning on the rails, on the network rail as well. So we're expecting on the tube that 10,000 tube workers will walk out today. We've seen pictures of many of them at picket lines all over London, and 400 overground workers are expected to go on strike today as well. This is strike action over pay, jobs and conditions. It's actually the 5th time that RMT members on the London Underground have gone on strike so far this year. And of course, it's impacting people who are going to work, and also on a Friday, people that would usually come into town for the weekend, tourists or perhaps people that are coming for some drinks on a Friday night. But there is little or no daytime service on the trains or the tube, and there is no night tube whatsoever. There is some limited services, so do check before you travel, but it is very disrupted out there today. And just to give you an idea, Bev, of the level of disruption, the tube usually handles up to 5 million passengers a day. At peak time, more than 500 trains and tubes are running around the capital. So that gives you a sense of just how much disruption there could be today. And it's certainly the sense that I'm getting on the ground here at Victoria. And there's also lots of people obviously heading onto the road. There's no other choice for them today. And already we have the congestion data from this morning. It was 26% last Friday. It's at 40% today. So a lot higher than it was this time last week. That's according to latest TomTom data. Your journey at the moment is taking 40% longer if you are in London and you're heading out on those roads. So the advice today is if you have to travel, then do leave plenty of time and check before you travel.
Thank you, Ellie. The absolutely brilliant Ellie Costello there at Victoria Station, who just elucidates these stories in the most fantastic way. But my heart was sinking listening to that. So let's just think about how damaging these strikes are to our economy. Or have we just got used to it all because of COVID restrictions normalising things like working from home? Well, never mind. We're not allowed to go anywhere. We better just stay at home. Well, joining me now to discuss this is Andy Mayer, Chief Operating Officer at the Institute of Economic Affairs. Andy, thank you so much for joining me. There has been a bit of a psychological shift, hasn't there, I think, in the population in the last couple of years, which means that on a day like this, when there are these strikes, we just sort of accept it in a way and carry on working from home. Does that mean that the economic effects of this sort of disruption aren't as significant as they might have been in, say, 2019?
Well, that's correct in part, but we've got to be very careful. What we know is that for those of us who can work from home, as you can see I'm doing today, this is just another day like it was in lockdown, that we can just get on with our jobs without having much impact on our lives. And that will also, for example, affect civil servants working in the Department for Transport who may not be as on the ball with this issue as they otherwise might have been if it actually impacted them. The people who are really impacted still are the people who can't work from home, people involved in the food trade, delivery trade, also involved in other forms of transport, people involved in essential services, and they're often on much lower pay than the tube drivers who think that they're being underpaid at the moment. So the impact is variegated. And for those of us, I think a lot of people working in the media, for example, working from home, it's a different story. The ability of the unions to do damage with these strikes has gone down. And we're looking at a picture today where there's less than half people in unions that were in the 1970s when striking was at its peak as a powerful tool to get change. And the amount of time lost to strikes is about 100 times less than it was, although it'll be a little bit higher than that this year. So these strikes, in terms of doing economic damage, it is there, but it's far less than it was. And many people may think they can simply ignore this and may have a bit of sympathy for some of the early offers to the strikers, which were very low.
Now, some people, of course, in any kind of crisis situation, Andy, there's always some people who do well out of this. So I'm thinking today, Uber drivers, taxi drivers, they will do, from an economic point of view, they will do quite well on these strike days, won't they? Like, I'm just thinking, give me some reasons to be positive, Andy, about somebody that might benefit financially for the last 3 or 4 days.
Yeah, they will benefit financially, but don't forget that taxi drivers also then find themselves on the front line dealing with people's frustrations. So they're picking up angry people, as Ellie showed from Victoria Station, who just want to get on with their lives or get on with their holiday if they're visiting this country and getting this as their experience of Britain. So nobody likes this. This is not pleasant. There aren't people rushing around going, hooray, it's a strike day. There are people who are having difficult days and being compensated appropriately for that.
Yeah, all right, Andy, thank you very much for helping us understand this in a little bit more detail. We're a bit short on time, but that was Andy Mayer, Chief Operating Officer at the Institute of Economic Affairs. Thank you very much. You know who else struggles and suffers from this? The teenagers who got their A-level results yesterday or their exam results, and they can't afford to just jump in an Uber to go and see their friends. They need the buses, they need the trains. Come on, sort it out. Right, a 44-year-old man has appeared in court charged with the murder of 87-year-old Thomas O'Halloran. You'll have all seen this. He was stabbed on a mobility scooter in West London earlier this week. Our Home and Security Editor, Mark White, is at Willesden Magistrates Court in North London for us now. Mark, good morning. What is the latest? It was a very moving story, this, wasn't it? It touched a lot of people.
Yeah, an absolutely horrific murder. 44-year-old Lee Byer appeared in the dock here at Willesden Magistrates Court. He spoke to confirm his name, his date of birth, and the fact that he has no fixed address. He is charged with the murder of 87-year-old Thomas O'Halloran in the afternoon of last Tuesday. As Mr O'Halloran was on his mobility scooter going down Western Avenue in Greenford, just by the busy A40 road into central London. We're told that Thomas O'Halloran suffered a fatal stab injury to his chest. The pensioner still managed to drive on in his mobility scooter for another 75 yards or so until he came across members of the public and asked for help. But despite the efforts of paramedics and the London Air Ambulance, he was pronounced dead at the scene. Now, Lee Byer has been remanded back into custody. He'll appear again, this time at the Central Criminal Court, the Old Bailey, next Tuesday, the 23rd of August.
OK, thank you, Mark. Thank you very much. And obviously, Mark will keep us updated as that story evolves. OK, now, as you know, we are the People's Channel and we love to hear your thoughts on the subjects that matter to you. GB viewer Chris Kinder got in touch to talk about how he's been impacted by the rail strikes, and I'm happy to be joined by Chris now. Welcome to the programme. Chris, is it Kinder or Kinder?
It's Kinder.
Kinder, OK.
You're being kinder to Kinder.
OK, now tell us what you think about this. What about the rail strikes? You look like you're sitting somewhere green and beautiful. I'm not sure I'd want to go anywhere.
Well, this is 300 miles from London. And to go to a medical appointment in London is quite a major exercise. And it must affect many other people around the country. Operations cancelled and total confusion for the NHS to do their job. In my case, last month, it forced me to have 3 nights accommodation in central London on the cheap and using student accommodation, £300 for the 3 nights. Today in King's Cross, Premier Inn, £175, all caused by the likes of Mick Lynch.
What do you think the effect is, Chris, on kind of collectively on our population? Because it feels like there's just so much on our shoulders at the moment, doesn't it? And this just feels like one more thing, but we're getting very good at just kind of putting up with this inconvenience.
Bev, no, these strikes across the country are doing serious damage to the British economy. Serious.
Well, we had somebody in here yesterday from one of the rail unions, and he was arguing that the action that they're taking is for all workers, not just for those in the transport industry, but for everybody who is seeing fat cat salaries, fat cat bonuses, whilst the workers have worse pay and conditions. Are you even slightly persuaded by that argument?
Not at all. Not at all. Pensioners, they missed out on the triple lock. Hopefully we'll get it back this year. I think we've all got to take a knock if we're going to come out of COVID and if we are going to turn this country round.
Well, I think you're right, Chris. Well, I hope you do manage to get into London. Did you say you're trying to, like you say, 300 miles away? Where are you, if you don't mind me asking?
Yes, I'm in Morland Smith, near Falmouth, Cornwall.
OK, beautiful.
And it's a great place, but when you've got appointments in London, I got appointments for September. I don't know if they'll be on strike. Normally, you can get up on a morning train, time your appointment and get back on a later train. But if you can't, it's £175 for accommodation.
It's horrendous. And it's the uncertainty, Chris. And that sort of uncertainty, it's very difficult psychologically, isn't it? We had it for 2 years of COVID, of goalposts changing all the time. You can do this, you can't do this. And I think the impact that's having on people's just general... I'm reluctant to use the word mental health because I think that gets bandied around a bit too easily. But just on the general mood of individuals and on our energy levels and our ability to go about our daily basis, it feels like it's getting harder and harder.
They don't make life easier for us when it should be getting easier post-COVID.
Yeah.
And for the NHS, which is my main concern at the present time, think of operations cancelled, think of teams of specialists unable to operate, unable to attend to their patients, including members of the union who obviously have also got appointments with the NHS, and they've even shot themselves in the foot and can't even get to their appointments.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've got this, we've got these excess deaths of more than 1,500 people a week in the country for the last few months. And I'm sure this is part of the reason why people, like you say, can't get to appointments. They're having medical procedures delayed because of this general disruption. We're finding it hard to move people around, it feels, all the time, doesn't it? Let me ask you one more question, Chris, before I let you go, you've got a bit of a shaky camera there. I don't know what you're
I'm
doing.
just trying to line it up, actually.
Oh, don't worry. Listen, our cameramen have that
there
problem
we go,
as well.
I got it.
There we go. I can see you now. I just want to ask you about the GB News hostings tonight. We're showing them exclusively, hosted by Alistair Stewart from Manchester at 7 o'clock this evening. I presume you will be watching as a GB News fan.
Most certainly. Most certainly.
Fabulous. What would you like to hear from either candidate? And do you have a favourite at this stage?
Sort out the crossings.
Yeah.
Nationally, we've got no borders, and we are stoking up major problems for the future of this country. Major. And the government is just not tackling it. Excuses. Yeah. Oh, we're going to cap the number who come to the UK. An utter joke.
Yeah, you're right. Chris, thank you so much. Yet again, confirming that GB News viewers could run the country probably a lot better than most of the people who are charged with doing it at the moment. Chris, enjoy your day there in the sunshine.
Thank you, Bev.
Thank you. Thank you ever so much for talking to us. Right, I'm going to go to a couple of your views. Lots of you were getting in touch. Loads of you were really happy to see Fergal Shark here, a name from the 80s and the 90s that we'd all know, talking about water pollution. Sian has said, nationalise our water. Get rid of foreign companies who own them but don't give a damn about repairs of water pipes or the quality of our water. You know, Wessex Water is owned by a Malaysian company. I know. Some of the stuff that I've learned in the last few weeks while we've been looking at this water issue. And Ian has said, wasn't Rishi Sunak's leadership campaign planned last December entitled Ready for Rishi? Obviously not, it appears, says Ian. And Steve on water pollution. This is caused directly by the lack of river dredging. So rivers do not hold as much water, and building on the floodplains as well as the river dredging. These two items, says Steve, directly increase the amount of rainwater that goes into the sewers. This then overfills the sewer plants, causing them to offload contaminated sewage into rivers, streams and the sea. Thank you. It's interesting to see this from all these sort of angles that I just hadn't really occurred to me. And Andy says, last one, perhaps Alistair should be asking Rishi and Liz tonight at 7 o'clock on GB News what they are going to do about pollution in our rivers and seas. There's no doubt that is on a lot of your minds at the moment. Right, keep your thoughts coming in to me, won't you? Email gbviews@gbnews.uk. We'll be back with more of today's top stories and plenty of your views after this quick break and the glorious looking weather.
Hi there. A bright day for many. Sunny spells expected, especially in the south, but there will be showers and a keen breeze, especially in the north. And that's because an area of low pressure is slow moving near Iceland, and tightly packed isobars to the south of that low is bringing, well, fairly breezy conditions to the northern half of the UK. Quite a number of showers. There were some showers earlier in the day across the rest of England and Wales. They're now moving and clearing the far southeast by shortly after 1 or 2 p.m. Once they clear, it'll be a bright afternoon for much of England and Wales, some sunshine, 1 or 2 showers for North Wales, Northwest England, but the bulk of the showers, along with a keen breeze, will be for Scotland and Northern Ireland. Temperatures not straying far from average, low 20s for many, 24, 25 Celsius in the southeast. Many showers disappear in the evening, with clear spells breaking out fairly widely for a time before the cloud thickens. Outbreaks of heavy and blustery rain come into the west of Scotland and Northern Ireland, a strengthening breeze. 11 to 12 Celsius for much of Scotland and Northern Ireland. Mid-teens more likely for parts of England and Wales, although in some sheltered spots a fresh start to Saturday. A bright start for the Midlands, East Anglia and the southeast. We keep these sunny spells here into the afternoon. Otherwise a lot of cloud and heavy rain moving through Scotland and Northern Ireland, pushing into parts of northern England, turning more showery. And it's a breezy day for many. That wind gusty around the showers that will be coming through across northern parts of the UK, and 1 or 2 showers will pop up further south as well, but these will be few and far between. The heaviest downpours will be associated with a line of rain pushing into North Wales and northern England, as well as the North Midlands by evening. Scattered showers again on Sunday, with more prolonged rain coming through later. Another showery day on Monday.
There's just 2 weeks left of voting in the battle to become Britain's next Prime Minister. Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak have been dashing around the country, and tonight they make their pitches to Conservative voters in the heart of Labour-run Manchester. But do either of them have what it takes to defend and maintain Boris Johnson's mighty majority? GB News is proud to be hosting the Conservative hustings in Manchester, live and exclusive from 7 p.m. GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh my goodness. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Good morning. Thank you for joining me. This is To The Point on GB News with me, Beth Turner, on your TV, radio and online. If you haven't downloaded the app yet, do. I'm not a massive fan of apps, don't tell anyone. Most of them don't work properly. But the GB News one is superb, I guarantee. Now, in the next hour, A-level results, free speech and a lot more. Make sure you keep me updated with your views as well. Lots of them are coming in. gbviews at gbnews.uk. And first of all, though, here is the latest news with Beth.
Bev, thank you. Good morning. It's 1 minute past 11. I'm Bethany Elsey here to bring you up to date from the GB newsroom. NHS leaders are warning the UK faces a humanitarian crisis this winter unless further action is taken to tackle rising energy bills. In a letter to the government, the NHS Confederation says people will have to choose whether to skip meals to heat their homes or live in cold, damp conditions. And this could lead to an increase in annual deaths and create further pressure on the health service. The government previously announced £400 of support for millions of households, but won't do anything further until the new Prime Minister is in office. More travel disruption today as Transport for London workers strike in a long-running dispute over jobs and pensions. Commuters are being advised to avoid the tube, which will have little or no services running. Most buses across West and South West London are also cancelled. Mainline services across the UK have been affected this morning due to yesterday's strike, and there's further action planned for tomorrow. Transport Secretary Grant Shapps claims union bosses are getting in the way of a deal.
I think the simple answer to this would be for the union bosses to actually put the deal that's on the table, which is an 8% pay rise over 2 years, no compulsory redundancies, for example, on Network Rail, and put that to their membership. And I think if they did that, the membership may well accept it. If that doesn't happen, plan B, if you like, is we're going to make sure that we actually get on with these very, very important modernisations, which are holding our railway back.
Well, Labour's Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, says it's the government that's hindering negotiations.
What I'd say to the RMT is the primary motivator for you going on strike today is your concerns about conditions the government may attach to a funding deal with TfL. We're on the same side here. Nobody wants the government to be attaching unreasonable conditions to our deal. The only reason we need a deal is because of the pandemic. Let's work together with businesses, with other Londoners, to get the best possible deal for London. Today, it's ordinary Londoners, it's commuters, it's businesses who are caught in the crossfire. The government, Grant Shapps, isn't affected at all.
UK retail sales increased in July, but experts say a downward trend in consumer spending shows no sign of turning around. The Office for National Statistics says the 0.3% rise in July is significantly higher than the expectations of a 0.2% drop, but sales fell by 1.2% in the 3 months to July. Retailers say online sales picked up due to offers and promotions, but spending on clothing and household goods declined again. The government has borrowed more money than expected, with interest payments on debt rising by more than 40% last month. The ONS says government borrowing hit £4.9 billion in July. That's more than £2 billion higher than predicted by experts. Both candidates for Prime Minister have pledged further assistance for households amid the rising cost of living. But the higher than expected figures puts pressure on funds available to the government. And some news in the last half an hour. A 44-year-old man has appeared at Willesden Magistrates Court, charged with the murder of an 87-year-old man, Thomas O'Halloran. Lee Byer is accused of stabbing Mr O'Halloran to death while he was riding his mobility scooter in the town of Greenford on Tuesday. He was pronounced dead at the scene. Mr Byer was remanded in custody and will appear at the Old Bailey later this month. And a man has been arrested following the abduction and sexual assault of a 6-year-old girl in Greater Manchester on Wednesday. The 23-year-old remains in custody for questioning. A 35-year-old man who was arrested on Wednesday has been released without further action. Police say the girl was attacked in the Droylsden area. She's now back safely with her family. A drought has been declared in southwest Wales after an extended period of hot and dry weather. A hosepipe ban has also been introduced to ease the pressure on public water supplies. National Resources Wales says the whole region had just 65.5% of its average rainfall in July. And self-driving, fully autonomous vehicles could be on UK motorways in the next 3 years under new government plans. The Department for Transport says £100 million is being invested into the scheme, along with new legislation to allow for the safe rollout of the technology. The government claims the self-driving industry could create up to 38,000 jobs and make roads safer. This is GB News. We bring you more news as it happens. Now let's get back to Bev.
A very good morning to you. This is To The Point on GB News with me, Beth Turner, on TV, radio, online. This is so close. So here's what's coming up for the next hour. Rishi Sunak is trailing Liz Truss in the polls, and some are calling for him to quit now and just let her get on with the job. But is this likely to happen, and can the former Chancellor launch a comeback? I'll be speaking to legendary pollster Professor Sir John Curtis about whether the polls can actually be trusted. Harry Potter author J.K. Rowling has received death threats on Twitter for defending Salman Rushdie, who was, of course, stabbed on stage in New York last week. Twitter has finally suspended the account that sent the death threats. I'll talk with Toby Young of Free Speech Union about whether all so-called controversial authors are now at risk. And finally, protests and counter-protests are erupting across the country over drag queen story hours at community libraries. But what is the fuss all about? I'll be speaking with drag queen Vanity Van Glow towards the end of the hour. Got all of that coming up and much more across the programme. And of course, get in touch with your views as usual, gbviews@gbnews.uk. So the leadership contest between Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss continues as GB News' Alistair Stewart is to host a hustings in Manchester tonight. Watch and hear it live on GB News from 7 o'clock. You don't want to miss it. Our reporter Sophie Reaper has been out on the streets in Manchester ahead of tonight's debate to ask people what issues matter to them and who they might want to choose.
Helping people with low income and putting some money or something on for them.
I think that they should be looking to do something about the energy bill crisis that we've got going on. The cost of living is just going to spiral out of control. I think people are already struggling.
I don't care whoever it is, as long as they, do something. Action is, speaks louder than words.
Tories need to be out, but also Keir Starmer needs to not be pretending to be Labour when he's absolutely not. We need to stop trying to privatise everything.
I don't think Sunak comes from a working class background. He doesn't know what it's like to live a standard life.
Make it better, take care of the people. More recreation and the children and the streets. Homeless people, help homeless people.
It's Labour, it's got to be. This is a working city. Everybody works, everybody struggles. But ain't no one helping Manchester out.
The new Prime Minister needs to focus on the levelling up of the UK. I think the public transport up here is shocking compared to London. They keep on saying that they're going to do more to help Manchester, but they're really not.
The one that's probably going to do the better job is probably Rishi Sunak. However, I wouldn't necessarily prefer Rishi Sunak. I'm not sure I trust him.
A lot of people are struggling. They are well dressed with a gold chain, but mentally they are going through a lot. And I don't think government is doing enough.
If I was Prime Minister for the day, the first thing I would do, I'd get them all in and I'd say, right, there's no more expenses being paid and I want you to take a pay cut. And whoever was left, they're the true ones, aren't they? They're the ones that'll help you lead the country. We want a strong person.
And that's neither of them?
No. They've got no bottle, darling.
Better wages, better schemes for single parents.
Increase the minimum wage to help the people that are really struggling, which is lots. I work in a hospital and we've got nurses that are using food banks. Should never be happening.
Tax cuts is a load of nonsense because at the end of the day, we're a society.
Funny, isn't it? See, a lot of you getting in touch saying a lot of people in those packages are just asking for something for nothing. Well, I don't know, a bit controversial. What can we expect from tonight? Natasha Clark, Chief Political Correspondent at The Sun, joins me now. Hello, Natasha. Lovely to see you. I don't know whether you heard our members of the public there up in Manchester where these hustings will be tonight. Is anything that you're hearing from people like that, is that surprising or is it kind of par for the course now at this stage in this leadership campaign?
I think what you heard from your package just then is exactly how much the British public are worried about the cost of living, isn't it? They just keep mentioning it again and again. Energy bills, the price of everything just going up. That's the one thing that I think the candidates are not going to be able to get away from at this hustings tonight in Manchester. Obviously, we've been talking about it for such a long time, but the reality is the predictions for what the bills are going to look like come this winter just keep going up and up and up. And until the candidates come out with their plan to sort out this energy crisis, I don't think that's going to go away. However, obviously, both of them are keen to sort of wait to iron out the details when they do become Prime Minister. Obviously, Liz Truss, the current front runner, and we're expecting her to win according to all the polls at the moment. Doesn't want to lay out her plans exactly just yet. She wants to wait until she does get into number 10, figure out all the options in front of her. We know that the Chancellor and the Business Secretary and others in government are laying the groundwork at the moment. They're preparing all these plans for what they could do, but she doesn't want to make any decisions just yet, which is obviously very frustrating for the public as they know their bills are going to go up, but they just don't know what help is going to be out there yet.
Both of these candidates, or either of these candidates, whoever wins this particular competition to go on to lead the Conservatives in the next general election, they're going to need the Sun newspaper on side, Natasha. Really, the success or failure of that person very much always lies in the hands of the Sun newspaper. You remain incredibly influential in the minds of the British public. Do you have a preferred choice? Does the newspaper have a preferred choice of these two candidates? And if we assume that it is going to be Liz Truss now at this stage, how are you going to sell her to the British public? Is she an easy sell or not? Boris was easy.
That's a very flattering thing for you to say. Yeah, I think at the moment we haven't come out for either candidate. Obviously, lots of newspapers have endorsed Liz Truss. I think some of the Times has also endorsed Rishi Sunak. But at the moment, we're keeping our powder dry. And that's not to say that we might not endorse someone at some point. But what our Sun readers really care about is who is going to deliver for them. So whoever candidate does make get the keys to number 10 and make it, what we really care about is not who is in charge, but really what they are going to do to help our readers. And at the moment, that's all they care about really is how they're going to get help to pay their energy bills, who is going to help tackle inflation, who is going to help sort out the economy. Obviously, a lot of our readers in the past obviously did support Boris Johnson and the Conservatives, and I think they will be looking maybe towards Liz Truss to sort of carry on the mantle for some of those policies. Things like being tough on Ukraine and levelling up the country, which she sort of said that she will continue on. But that's not to say that a lot of our readers too will look to Rishi Sunak and his record on the economy, and hopefully that will become clear in the months to come as we do enter a really tough economic period. I'm sure there are many people that will also look to him to go, he's probably the guy that can take on that mantle. But yeah, whichever candidate wins, I'm sure that some readers and our newspaper will keep on fighting for as much help and support as we can get for them to weather this economic storm.
Well, people just don't trust Rishi Sunak, and we heard that from our people there in Manchester that we interviewed. He has this problem with trust, and it is partly because he is such a personally wealthy man. People therefore look at him with suspicion. What are you actually doing? Whose tune are you dancing to? Why do you want this kind of power if you could live a fulfilling and a purposeful and a profitable life elsewhere? Do you think it's going to be obvious to Liz Truss, if she gets this prime ministerial position, what she will do with him? What will she do? Will she put him back in charge of the economy? Because frankly, I can't help, the irony isn't lost on me and our viewers as well and our listeners, that they're talking about the state of the economy that he was in charge of.
Completely, and that is obviously going to, be a real drag for Rishi Sunak. At the end of the day, a lot of people say that he, they would trust him to sort of take on the economy. But some other people say, no, actually, you're the one that sort of presided over huge tax rises and the economy going into this spiral in the first place. So there is a real divide amongst Conservative members at the moment. And yeah, I think as we go into this sort of next phase where we expect Liz Truss to become prime minister, what does she do with Rishi Sunak? She has said that she will try and offer him a part of her government, but does that mean a big government job? Obviously, no government job that she's going to give him is going to be bigger than Chancellor, which is the one that he had beforehand. And obviously, she's probably not going to want to put him back as Chancellor if she does make the keys to number 10. Which raises the question, what will Rishi Sunak do if she offers him a job that's probably less than Chancellor, which might be likely? Who knows? Will he take that chance, or will he decide to go back to the backbenches and sort of fight her and fight the government and sort of, put pressure on her from there? I think that's probably the more likely scenario, at least until the next election, where he might sort of rethink his priorities and whether he still wants to continue to be an MP.
Yeah, it is going to be interesting to watch. Thank you very much, Natasha Clark, there, Chief Political Correspondent at The Sun. And I'm joined now, actually, by John Curtis, Professor Sir John Curtis of the University of Strathclyde, to talk all things polling. Hello, John. We've spoken to you a few times over the last few weeks. Have you seen much change in the polling numbers when it comes to the popularity of these two? What's the latest?
Well, the honest truth is that certainly since MPs had whittled down the contestants to the two, Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss, it's not obvious that public opinion amongst Conservative members has particularly shifted. Latest poll from YouGov that came out yesterday morning, once you leave aside the relatively small number of don't know, 66% for Liz Truss, 34% for Rishi Sunak. That's just 3 points down for Liz Truss as compared with YouGov's previous poll. Conservative Home website, which of course is not a poll, we should repeat that, but has a lot of Conservative members who are signed up to the site. They had Liz Truss at 60%, Rishi Sunak at around 30%, virtually unchanged from a similar exercise 2 weeks ago. Now, Opinion, who throughout this contest have always put the thing a little bit closer, they say 61% for Liz Truss. But even so, one has to say that all the expectations of the polls is A, that Liz Truss is well ahead, B, that it hasn't shifted much. Though if you look at the innings of the YouGov poll, maybe there's a little bit of evidence that those who hadn't yet quite made up their minds or certainly hadn't sent their ballot paper in might be slightly more favourable to him, but nothing like on the scale required to narrow the gap that does appear to exist between the two of them.
John, why do you think that is? What is it that you think Liz Truss has as either a person or a politician? Because sometimes the two are quite separate, aren't they? What does she have that Rishi Sunak doesn't?
Well, I think if I were to sum it up, I would say that Liz Truss has proved to be the more adept politician during this contest, even though we might want to argue that Rishi Sunak has sometimes come across as the more prime ministerial. And that's certainly one of the contrasts that emerges when you start looking at some of the polling. So what do I mean by that? Well, the honest truth is, this has been a contest which has been overtaken by the news since it really began at the beginning of July, i.e. the cost of living crisis, as you were just saying, has come to completely dominate this campaign. But what has Liz Truss done during this campaign to respond to that changing news agenda? The short answer is virtually nothing. She has kept to her crucial strapline, which has been tax cuts, not handouts. That's been a very clear, consistent message. It summarises the principal difference between her and Rishi Sunak, and she has stuck to her guns. And because it's proved to be a relatively popular message with the electorate that she's trying to appeal to, it's proved to be seemingly an effective strategy. Just think about, get Brexit done or take back control. She has come up with a phrase that's similar. Rishi Sunak, in contrast, and I think I would argue, not that his arguments are necessarily better, but they certainly tend to be somewhat more nuanced. The truth is, he's somewhat to the left of Liz Truss on many of issues. He's got somewhat more subtle positions. And he's certainly very quick on his feet. But he's never had a strapline that summarises his message, number one. And two, yes, he has changed his position during the course of the campaign in the wake of the cost of living crisis, and has been much more upfront about the need to spend more and to target that money on those who are less well off. And he's been contrasting himself with Liz Truss's tax cuts, which he claims would only help the better off. Now, we can argue the merits of those positions. He's demonstrated a degree of flexibility, but it's not a flexibility that's helped him to have a clear message that makes it clear to Tory members what he stands for.
OK, thank you very much, Professor Sir John Curtis of the University of Strathclyde. Always nice to hear your fascinating and sort of forensic insight, isn't it? OK, after the break, author J.K. Rowling has received death threats for defending Sir Salman Rushdie. Is this the new normal for our authors and for anyone that really wants to express an opinion? I'm going to be talking to Toby Young about that after this short break.
There's just 2 weeks left of voting in the battle to become Britain's next Prime Minister. Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak have been dashing around the country, and tonight they make their pitches to Conservative voters in the heart of Labour-run Manchester. But do either of them have what it takes to defend and maintain Boris Johnson's mighty majority? GB News is proud to be hosting the Conservative hustings in Manchester, live and exclusive from 7 p.m. GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh, my goodness. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. Over a drink, we have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation, This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Join me, Darren Grimes, for Real Britain every Saturday and Sunday from 2 p.m. A news hour that comes with a trigger warning. Scorching hot opinion with prominent guests saying the unsayable and a little bit of weekend fun thrown in. Unlike other broadcasters, I won't be forgetting what the B in our name stands for. So Howie in for Real Britain Saturday and Sunday from 2 p.m.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
Good morning, it's 11:24 a.m. on Friday morning. You are watching To The Point with Beth Turner on GB News, on your TV, online and radio. Now, Harry Potter author J.K. Rowling, like many of us, was shocked at the brutal stabbing of the Satanic Verses author Salman Rushdie last week. However, when she tweeted, feeling very sick right now, let him be okay, she got a tweet back from Mia Asif Aziz saying, don't worry, you are next. Twitter originally told J.K. Rowling that this threat did not breach any of its community guidelines. Only now, however, after a backlash from the author, who pointed out that they definitely did breach the guidelines, they have suspended Aziz's account this morning. Meanwhile, Joanne Harris, chair of the Society of Authors, who Rowling has previously called out for not defending gender-critical female authors, made a poll seemingly mocking her. She asked fellow authors if they've ever received a credible death threat. She denies that the poll was targeted at J.K. Rowling specifically, but has liked tweets slamming the author since. So, is this just two authors clashing, or are there serious implications here for the free expression and defending authors' rights to speak without fear? Well, here to talk about it is the person who is most qualified on this topic, Toby Young, General Secretary of the Free Speech Union. Good morning, Toby. When you listen to that sequence of events there surrounding the death, luckily, the injury to Sir Salman Rushdie and J.K. Rowling's response and the Twitter, just tell me, first of all, what are your feelings when you hear that events?
Well, I was horrified by the news that Salman Rushdie had been attacked on stage, stabbed multiple times, including in the face, had to be airlifted to hospital where he was put on a ventilator. I think he's off the ventilator now, but he's still in hospital. It was absolutely horrifying. It was an attack not just on Salman Rushdie's freedom of expression, but all of our right to freedom of expression. And I think every writer, every author should have unequivocally condemned the attack and made common cause with Salman Rushdie. But Joanne Harris, instead of focusing on that, seems to have become embroiled in this spat with J.K. Rowling, a spat, I have to say, entirely of Joanne Harris's making, in which she mocked J.K. Rowling, as you've just said, for claiming she'd received a death threat when it was as plain as it could be, as plain as day, that she had in fact received a death threat, and it was ridiculous that Twitter didn't remove it until this morning. And, the Society of Authors is a trade union for authors, illustrators, translators. It's their job to stand up for writers who receive death threats, like J.K. Rowling, but instead she mocked her. And that is, I'm afraid, in keeping with Joanne Harris's rather ambivalent relationship with free speech. She's failed to defend numerous gender-critical authors who are at odds with trans rights activists, not just J.K. Rowling, but also Gillian Phillip, a member of the Free Speech Union, who we're supporting. Gillian lost her job as a writer. She was sacked because she expressed her solidarity with J.K. Rowling. We haven't had a squeak from Joanne Harris defending Gillian Phillips's right to free speech. In the past, Joanne Harris has said that she thinks cancel culture is a good thing. It's a good way of dispensing with things that are out of date, no longer in fashion, that we now disapprove of. And that's one of the reasons she hasn't come to the defense of any of these beleaguered authors. So, her track record when it comes to defending authors under fire and defending free speech more generally is pitiful. And I really don't understand why she's leading this trade union.
I have to say, obviously, Joanne Harris isn't here to defend herself. We would very much welcome her on GB News anytime if she wanted to come and give her version of events and what did motivate her to put that Twitter poll out there. But on a broader level, Toby, what does this tell us about where we are at the moment in 2022 in terms of free speech? We've got the online harm safety bill, which seems to be going ahead, and then it gets cancelled, it goes ahead again, it gets revised. I feel like we're at, a turning point. We're at a precipice, aren't we? Whereas everything that happens from this point onwards could be incredibly important for future generations who should be able to express themselves freely, even if people don't like what they have to say.
Absolutely. As you say, the online safety bill, I think, poses the greatest threat to free speech of our generation. But there are other threats as well. The Law Commission of England and Wales has recommended extending the number of protected categories. At the moment, you can be prosecuted for stirring up hatred against people on racial grounds, religious grounds, or grounds of sexual orientation. But the Law Commission of England and Wales, a highly influential body, has suggested vastly increasing the number of categories of people you can be prosecuted for saying something hateful about. I mean, that's one of the difficulties with hate speech law. It's constantly expanding. That's the nature of the beast. There are just more and more things we can't say. If we had a First Amendment in this country, like they do in America, we wouldn't have any hate speech laws. That's why they don't have any hate speech laws in the United States, but we don't have a First Amendment. And one of the reasons I think free speech is in such jeopardy is that we've imported these censorious, authoritarian, woke culture that sprung up in the United States in the past 10 to 15 years. But it's much more damaging and corrosive in the UK because, unlike in America, we don't have any First Amendment protections. So there are just fewer and fewer things we can say. I mean, I think everyone would accept that there are things we could say 10 years ago that we can't say now. Even if you say them on WhatsApp, in a private conversation with one other person, you can still get into trouble. We looked after someone at the Free Speech Union who got into trouble for precisely that, a one-on-one private conversation on WhatsApp. So, it's just reaching a ridiculous extent, and we really need to fight back and defend free speech. And I'm hoping that if Liz Truss does win the Conservative leadership, she makes a real point of standing up for free speech. She ditches the worst aspects of the online safety bill. She sees off the Law Commission's attempt to create new hate speech laws in the United Kingdom. And she really does a decent job of standing up for free speech. And I hope that she's asked about that in the GB News hustings later today.
Let's hope so. I wouldn't be surprised. Toby Young there, General Secretary of the Free Speech Union, and doing a brilliant job of supporting free speech. And which is also what we do here. It's one of the things that is different about us here at GB News. You've been getting in touch with me about the rail strikes, and James has said the rail strikes are caused by the failures of management to delegate with staff in the proper manner. There is a democratic process, once all verbal processes have failed, to come to a strike decision. It's not a 1970s style down tools and all out. That's simply not legal. Who else? Waterways. You got in touch. We had that brilliant interview with Fergal Sharkey. If you weren't watching it, download the GB News app and have a look at that. Fergal Sharkey, yeah, the singer. He's very, very passionate about keeping our rivers and waterways clean. And Steve has said, just a quick survey of my street alone, in 80% of gardens are no longer gardens, they are car parks. This is a big problem. This means that rainfall goes directly into the drains rather than soaking into the earth. It overwhelms the brooks and rivers, and within minutes you have flash floods. Yep, thank you, Steve in Dudley, for letting me know about that. Just a reminder, 7 o'clock tonight, we are going to have this hustings from Manchester. If you're thinking, what's that word, hustings? It's where there's a little political debate that isn't necessarily open to the public. It's just members of the political party at the time. So that's tonight at 7 o'clock with Alistair Stewart. Now, after the break, I'll be talking about drag queen story time. What is that, I hear you say? And why are they causing such protests around them? But before that, here are your morning headlines.
Bev, thank you. Good morning. It's 11:33. I'm Bethany Elsey in the GB newsroom. NHS leaders are warning the UK faces a humanitarian crisis this winter unless further action is taken to tackle rising energy bills. In a letter to the government, the NHS Confederation says surging costs could mean people can't afford to heat their homes, potentially leading to an increase in annual deaths and creating further pressure on the health service. The government has promised £400 of support for millions of households, but won't do anything further until the new Prime Minister is in office. More travel disruption today as Transport for London workers strike in a continued row over jobs and pensions. Commuters are being advised to avoid the tube, which will have little or no services running. Most buses across West and South West London are also cancelled. Mainline services across the UK have been affected this morning too, due to yesterday's strike, and there's further action planned for tomorrow. A 44-year-old man has appeared at Willesden Magistrates Court charged with the murder of 87-year-old Thomas O'Halloran. Lee Byer is accused of stabbing Mr O'Halloran to death while he was riding his mobility scooter in the town of Greenford on Tuesday. He was pronounced dead at the scene. Mr Byer was remanded in custody and will appear at the Old Bailey later this month. A man has been arrested following the abduction and sexual assault of a 6-year-old girl in Greater Manchester on Wednesday. The 23-year-old remains in custody for questioning. A 35-year-old man who was arrested on Wednesday has been released without further action. Police say the girl was attacked in the Droylsden area and she's now back safely with her family. On TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. We'll get back to Bev in just a moment.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
But first, here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.185 and €1.179. And the price of gold currently stands at £1,477 and 22 pence per ounce.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for physical investment.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Good morning. It is 11:37 a.m. on Friday. This is To The Point with me, Beth Turner, on GB News. Thank you for joining me, whether it's on your TV, on your radio, or on the nifty little app. Now, a 44-year-old man has appeared in court this morning charged with the murder of 87-year-old Thomas O'Halloran. This is the elderly gentleman who was stabbed on a mobility scooter in West London near Ealing earlier this week. Our Home and Security editor, Mark White, is at Willesden Magistrates Court in North London for us now. Mark, what's happened this morning and what do we know?
This is 44-year-old Lee Byer, who was arrested in the early hours of yesterday morning by armed police in Southall in West London, charged now with the murder of 87-year-old Thomas O'Halloran. We'll all remember this, of course, from Tuesday afternoon. Mr O'Halloran was on his mobility scooter in Greenford in West London on Western Avenue, just by the busy A40, when he was stabbed. The court heard that he suffered a fatal stab injury to his chest. Despite that, he managed to drive on his mobility scooter for another 75 metres or so until he came across members of the public and asked for help. Now, despite the best efforts of paramedics and the London Air Ambulance, Mr O'Halloran was declared dead at the scene. He was well known in the area, originally from County Clare in the west of Ireland. This was a man who was a local busker who would raise money for charity, including just recently for the war in Ukraine. So very well known in the Greenford area, and a lot of shock and sadness at the manner of his death. Now, Lee Byer appeared in court in the dock just for 5 minutes. He spoke to confirm his name, his date of birth, and the fact he had no fixed address. He has been remanded back into custody. He'll appear in court again, this time the Central Criminal Court, the Old Bailey, next Tuesday, the 23rd of August.
OK, thank you very much, Mark. Now, on Wednesday, Mercy and I spoke to A-level student Oscar Rakowski about how he was feeling ahead of his results day after exam bosses issued a warning that grades were going to fall this year.
Super nerve-wracking. I'm really nervous for tomorrow, and I'm just optimistic about what's to come. And I know that, like, obviously they've already been marked, so I can only go in with optimism and positivity and hope for the best. So I'm expecting 3 A's in those, but I am worried that with the grade boundaries, I might get lower than that. And for the university that I applied to, I need to get AAB. Okay. So that's what I'm hoping for. I'm not 100% sure what I want to do with my future, but I know that I don't want to be in academics for too much longer. So if I don't get the grades, then I'm going to apply for clearing.
Okay.
And hopefully there'll be some opportunities with that.
Well, you know what? I think any university would be absolutely crazy not to take you in. You're obviously a star student. Your mum's done incredibly well, and good luck. All the best.
Well, to tell us how it all went is Oscar himself and his mum, Sylvia Vasiak. Oscar and Sylvia, hello, good morning. Hi, Oscar.
Morning.
Oscar,
Good morning.
how did you do? Everybody I speak to, anecdotally, didn't do as well as they thought they were going to do. How about you?
Yeah, I did do a lot worse than I was hoping for, and I was actually on clearing yesterday, speaking with different universities for around 4 or 5 hours. Luckily, my mum was with me the whole time, so she was able to assist me in the calls, which made everything a lot easier. And I did manage to secure a couple of places through clearing, and hopefully that will go well.
Okay, so Oscar, what was that moment like? and Sylvia, you opened the envelope? You were hoping for 3 A's. I want to ask you what you got, but don't tell us if you're not comfortable to say that. I've got an 18-year-old. I know it's not easy. What was the moment like when you opened them and saw the results?
It was quite a shock, to be honest. I was definitely hoping for a lot better.
You were disappointed.
Yeah.
I mean, actually, he has a sister, as he mentioned earlier, and both myself and her, we were so stressed and we were just so worried, and we were just hoping for the best. We knew that whatever happens, happens. We also knew that even if he doesn't get the grades, it's not going to be the end of the world. However, I have to admit, we did not think too much of a backup plan.
Yeah, because we were planning for the best.
We were planning for the best, but we also knew that, and as I remember you mentioned, because I obviously watched Oscar's interview, and I remember you mentioned that your son was also getting through the A-levels, so it will be interesting to see or hear how he did. Oscar did far worse than he expected. However, he's been through a very, very tough year, actually a couple of years, and mostly the last year, which has affected his mental health. And actually, I'm so proud he did pass, and I think that's the most important thing. The results, again, were not what we were expecting. However, I'm very proud that actually, given everything that he had going on, and not to mention the pandemic and also missed classes, and I spoke to several of my friends who also had kids in the same situation, on the same boat, and they also said it's been such a terrible period for that generation and for the kids taking their levels, especially this year. And probably you as a parent and mum can relate to that as well, I suppose.
Oh, completely, Sylvia, completely. This is the cohort. Oscar's year are the ones. And in fact, the head teacher of my children's school was saying the same thing. You are the guys who really, really suffered. I would say it's the very, very elderly who didn't get to see their families in the care homes. They had it tough. And then I would also say that you guys also had it really tough. Just give us an idea, Oscar, I mean, of what it has been like those last couple of years. What do you feel you missed out on? What was it like having to just be in your room and you're on a laptop all day, you can't see your mates, you're on your phone? What's it been like?
Yeah, it's been very tough for me. I was really struggling with, especially like the self-isolation periods with like lockdown and that sort of thing. And I was struggling to cope even with like motivation for learning and attending classes. And it was just a tough period for me.
Yeah, it was. And it was really hard for us mums, Sylvia, wasn't it, to know what to do? Because we wanted to say, and I did say to my son, go and see your friends, go and meet them. This is a virus which is posing no risk to your age group. For healthy young people, you're making too many sacrifices. And I think, if anything, in the last sort of the day like yesterday with the results, it makes us realise that your academic achievements are one very tiny piece of what it is to grow up to be a fully functioning and balanced human being, isn't it?
Yeah, and I'm glad that you mentioned that, because actually this is just, exactly, just one tiny element of, I guess, on the wider life career journey. And actually, probably in a few years' time, it will not really matter at all. And I think also it's also a testament to the fact that actually sometimes what we think might be the right way to go or do may not necessarily be so. And I think sometimes we have to be sort of put a little bit off guard to figure those things out. And I think that's going to be the case in Oscar's case as well, because actually I'm not sure whether he is happy to be sort of revealing where he is planning to go. But he was actually fortunate, he didn't mention, but he actually has secured several offers from various universities. And I have to admit, people throughout the clear, thank God for clearing here in England. It's amazing. And everyone who we spoke to was so supportive. And I think the breadth of courses also available for students who didn't do as well as they were hoping was amazing. And I just also wanted to, I guess, say to all of the A-level students, or pupils who have just completed their results, that actually well done to you all, congrats, and actually whatever path you choose to take, you will be fine, and it's just only the beginning of the journey. And I think they have suffered quite a lot, and as we were already discussing, I think they have so much to be proud of, because it's been so tough for us as parents, as mothers, and especially for the kids as well, who had to sort of learn how to really.
Well, listen, both of you, Sylvia and Oscar, thank you so much for joining us. Oscar, I don't know whether you've got any career plans, but let me tell you, we could do with some decent politicians. So if you could, frankly, I'll see you back on here in 15 years' time, 10 maybe. We need some decent politicians. That's my only suggestion. Thank you both. You're going to be fine, Oscar, with an amazing mum like that. How can you not be okay?
10 years.
Right, 10 years, see you back on here. You might be our Prime Minister. Right. Police were called to a Norwich public library on Wednesday to help keep the peace, as protesters and counter-protesters clashed over a drag queen story hour being held inside. Queen Titania Trust had organised the storytime session at the Norwich Millennium Library, but the event attracted a crowd of protesters who felt that it was inappropriate, and a group of counter-protesters who wanted the event to go ahead. It is a pattern that has emerged seemingly every time a drag queen story hour has been organised in this country, with Norfolk, Belfast, Cornwall and Reading seeing similar scenes. So joining me now is Vanity Van Glow, drag queen and host of the Vanity Project podcast. Thank you for joining us here this morning. We have this conversation an awful lot without actually hearing from any drag queens. So first of all, for those of us who don't know, what is Drag Queen Storytime and what is it aiming to do?
Well, first of all, I have to say, and thank you for having me on to discuss this, Drag Queen Storytime, for me, as a principally adult entertainer, I can't think of anything more tedious than reading to children. It's essentially an initiative in which drag queens who are bright and colourful, performing the role similarly to a clown, want to read to kids as something fun for the kids to do. Now, taken at face value, that is literally all it is. And I think that people have become... I can understand why people have become upset, why there's consternation around it, but I think they have a misapprehension about what drag is in these contexts. Because if you come to my show, it's quite spicy. There's a lot of adult humour, but there is a whole subgenre of drag. In fact, there's a whole subgenre of traditional British drag and panto, which is perfectly acceptable for kids. And so it's kind of inappropriate to be protesting that.
So you say that you do understand, though, why people might be upset by this. What do you think that is?
I think there's a couple of things. I think we suffer from a kind of cultural erosion in this country where, as we know, when America gets a cold, the whole world sneezes. And so the debates that take place over the pond tend to take place over here shortly thereafter. America doesn't have a tradition of the panto dame. If you look at Auntie Titania, who was reading the stories to the kids in Norwich, I mean, she's more or less a panto dame, and we've all been familiar with panto dames growing up. But also we have to remember that a lot of people are thinking of Lily Savage. They're thinking of of blue language, salty stories. They might even be thinking of burlesque and erotic striptease. Now, all of these things are part of the world of drag, but that's not necessarily the drag that's being put in front of kids in Drag Queen Story Hour. So the confusion comes, I think, it might be from some people might be watching this who don't realize that within drag, it's an art form. There's so many different expressions of that artistic work.
Do you think, I do find this absolutely fascinating, Vanity, this story, because there is a sense that there is a kind of a growing anti-science approach to gender What is a man? What is a woman? We're all hearing this debate. Politicians are given this as a kind of gotcha interview question. We're going to work out who you are if you can't tell us what a woman is. And there is some truth in that with this loss of gender boundaries does concern people. I am one of them as a mother of daughters and sons as to how children are understanding this. But are you saying that you think this is a very separate topic to a man in a dress, a bit like Widow Twankey, going to a library and reading a story? Do we have to separate those two issues?
I think that we can appreciate that there is some connection in a world where people are learning or considering different ways to express their identity. There is a connection between what drag performs as an art form. It performs a role that's mind-opening. I think some people feel like transgender ideology is being smuggled in the back door via Drag Queen Story Hour. But I don't think that's why Auntie Titania is going to read to kids. You know, Auntie Titania is a human being. She may have nieces and nephews. She may have children of her own. I don't know. And actually, it's delightful, I'm sure, for her to read to kids. And I have to tell you, I must reiterate, I personally cannot think of anything worse than having to read to kids. But that's not the kind of show that I'm doing.
But I suppose that's part of the you know, I have to read to my kids, and believe me, it is flipping boring when you read the same story every night, and they want the same story when they're little particularly, and you read that same book 25 times a week. So therefore, it does make people suspicious, doesn't it? That's why they say, well, why does she want to be there? What is her ulterior motive? Why doesn't she do it maybe just dressed as her... If this is what she likes to do, why doesn't she just do it as her normal self without a dress?
Well, that's not something that you would say to a clown, and it's not a suspicion that you would superimpose onto a comedian who's maybe doing comedian story hour. The art form of drag does involve being dressed in colourful and gender-bending ways. I understand the root of suspicion is always a lack of information or ignorance.
Yeah.
And I totally accept. Like I've been performing in the dungeons of Soho for many years. Not everyone comes to shows like mine, so they don't understand where drag is, what drag could be, and why in some instances it might be okay for kids. That's why I think it's important, and I'm grateful to have been asked on to talk about it. I think it's important that people in my line of work come and have this conversation with people who are confused or don't understand or are just thinking, what's going on over there?
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely right. And I think the idea that this is not necessarily in the same Venn diagram of trans activism or trans ideology, that's what people worry about. I guess what you're saying is an underappreciation of the artistic art of drag and performance. Again, I can imagine...
Quite free.
I can hear the inbox beeping now with emails coming in saying, but this isn't appropriate for children.
Well, I mean, it's for people to decide what's appropriate for their children. I know some people seem to have this thing where they really can't separate drag from innuendo. And I know drag queens have spent many years making innuendos, myself included.
That's kind of the point.
But what they might not be aware of is that drag has had a total explosion in the last half decade. And there's a whole genre of drag that it isn't about that saber-toothed satirical kind of approach anymore. For a lot of drag queens, it's kind of a form of Disney princess performance. Now, I find that a little bit tedious, but I can totally see why kids would love it.
Yeah, all right, thank you, and good luck with your Edinburgh show. Thank you for joining us and helping us to understand this in a little more detail. Vanity Van Glow there. That is it from me for today. That went quite quickly. I'm sitting in for Mark Dolan tonight at 9 o'clock, so please come back then. I'm thinking of setting up a little bed here under the desk and I'll just pop up at 9 o'clock. But don't go anywhere, because up next is the briefing with the political brainiac that is Tom Harwood. I'll see you at 9 o'clock tonight.
Hi there. A bright day for many. Sunny spells expected, especially in the south, but there will be showers and a keen breeze, especially in the north. And that's because an area of low pressure is slow moving near Iceland, and tightly packed isobars to the south of that low is bringing, well, fairly breezy conditions to the northern half of the UK. Quite a number of showers. There were some showers earlier in the day across the rest of England and Wales. They're now moving and clearing the far southeast by shortly after 1 or 2 p.m. Once they clear, it'll be a bright afternoon for much of England and Wales, some sunshine, 1 or 2 showers for North Wales, North West England, but the bulk of the showers, along with a keen breeze, will be for Scotland and Northern Ireland. Temperatures not straying far from average, low 20s for many, 24, 25 Celsius in the southeast. Many showers disappear in the evening, with clear spells breaking out fairly widely for a time before the cloud thickens. Outbreaks of heavy and blustery rain come into the west of Scotland and Northern Ireland, a strengthening breeze. 11 to 12 Celsius for much of Scotland and Northern Ireland. Mid-teens more likely for parts of England and Wales, although in some sheltered spots a fresh start to Saturday. A bright start for the Midlands, East Anglia and the southeast. We keep these sunny spells here into the afternoon. Otherwise, a lot of cloud and heavy rain moving through Scotland and Northern Ireland, pushing into parts of northern England, turning more showery. And it's a breezy day for many. That wind gusty around the showers that will be coming through across northern parts of the UK, and 1 or 2 showers will pop up further south as well, but these will be few and far between. The heaviest downpours will be associated with a line of rain pushing into North Wales and northern England, as well as the North Midlands by evening. Scattered showers again on Sunday, with more prolonged rain coming through later. Another showery day on Monday.
There's just 2 weeks left of voting in the battle to become Britain's next Prime Minister. Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak have been dashing around the country, and tonight they make their pitches to Conservative voters in the heart of Labour-run Manchester. But do either of them have what it takes to defend and maintain Boris Johnson's mighty majority? GB News is proud to be hosting the Conservative hustings in Manchester, live and exclusive from 7 p.m. GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Manchester. Yes, we're here with GB News and the heart of the Northwest, where we will be preparing, as we are now, for the hustings later this evening. Yes, from 7 till 9 p.m, GB News will be hosting the latest in the Conservative leadership hustings. Who will become the next Prime Minister? Will it be Rishi Sunak or will it be Liz Truss? The legend that is Alistair Stewart will be asking probing questions of these candidates, but also Conservative Party members from this region, from the Northwest, will be coming here as well, and it will be quite the spectacle. As you can see, we are preparing currently. The work is going underway, and we'll be exploring exactly what's coming up on this programme. We'll be